and gentlemen, this is your cruise director, Tyler. Hope you're out there enjoying another beautiful day on board as we sail these high seas. If you've ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of a cruise, it's time for you to pull up a stool, grab a drink, and buckle in, because you're about to hear stories that no other guests have heard before. Welcome to the Crew Bar in an episode of Ship-Faced, Confessions of a Drunken Cruise Director and Friends. Let's sail away. Very good. Well, then, Pastor James, is that what I can call you? What would you like to?
You know what? You can call me Dr. James because
Dr. James.
My doctorate is in consciousness studies. So
Come on, yeah.
And boy, if you ever need to have consciousness studies on a ship with 2,000 gay men, yeah, that's the time.
Okay, I can't wait to explore that.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Dr. James, then I found you living in Los Angeles. Where are you now?
I am in Studio City, Los Angeles. You know, that television thing, live from Studio City, California. It's Ship-Faced. Yeah, there you go.
Nailed it, doctor. And even I want guests to be aware here, even though we're talking to the doctor, this is not a ship doctor. This was a ship pastor that we are interviewing today, which is quite a unique position on board a cruise ship. A lot of people wouldn't think that a cruise would have a reverend or a pastor or even religious services, when sometimes it's like for some people, a little mini floating Vegas out there.
That's a polite way of saying it.
But I find it kind of delightful that you were a pastor on board and got to do that. So what are you doing with your life today?
Today, I run two centers, two spiritual centers, one in Los Angeles, the other one in Palm Springs. And I teach. I have a book that just came out, a 15th year anniversary of a book I wrote, and then I have a new book coming out in November. So mostly I teach. I speak every Sunday, either in Palm Springs or in Los Angeles, but I'm also a producer. We produce shows in New York, and we have a new one that we're taking into New York now. So it's a pretty full life. I started out as a Broadway actor and ended up as a minister. So it was like a circuitous to this point in my life.
Wow. Yeah. So as we talked, we have a lot of very similar threads, and ours is a little bit as to how that went for me. But that's really cool that today you are still doing so much that your upbringing influenced to be full and complete with both happening in your life right now.
True, yes.
So how did you get there? So how did you end up on ships and in that specific career path?
That's a great question. So there's a woman who is I will not use her name, but she runs one of the big cruise lines' entertainment. She hires all the entertainment for a number of these big cruise lines. She also happened to produce the off-Broadway show I wrote in 1992. So she called me up one day and she was like, James, are you free for this particular week? I was like, yeah, it depends. For what? She goes, well, our Catholic priest just bailed for the cruise, and I think I can get you on this cruise because it's an RSVP gay cruise. And I think if they knew they had a gay minister, they'd even be happier. So it would be like you just go, you're part of the crew, but you get your own gorgeous room, everything's on us, and you get to go be part of the RSVP cruise. So my husband was like, finally, there's an upside to you being a minister. And so I went onto the ship. But the funniest story is not the funniest story, but about that. I get there and there's this priest sitting on a bench right where we're about to embark. And I walked over and I sat down. I said, hi, are you going on the cruise? He goes, yes, I'm the priest on the ship. I said, you are? I said, are you aware that it's a gay ship, that it's going to be, 2,000 gay men? And Lent was beginning. Ash Wednesday was happening in the middle of the first week. And he said, no, I didn't know that. He said, but it won't matter. We love all people. So I went up to the guy running the cruise. I said, you've booked a gay minister and a priest. And he was like, there's no question there. We'll get rid of the priest. And next thing I knew, I saw the priest carrying his bags past me.
He got exorcised.
He exorcised the priest.
We exorcised the priest from the gay cruise.
But then they said to me, now we stop in San Pablo, and that's where we'll pick up the ashes, and you'll need to do a service where you give out ashes. And I was like, I'm not giving out ashes. I'm not a priest. I said, I grew up Catholic. I don't need to go back to that drama. And no, I'm not putting ashes on people's head. And they were like, you're going to have to. We have a lot of Catholics. I said, none of these queens are going to want ashes on their head. And then he was like, it's actually for the staff. They're all Catholic.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. And so I was like, all right, I always wanted to be a priest. So maybe I'll just be a priest. But I said, I can't. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll have the ashes there. I'll do a Lent service because I think Lent stands for Let's End Negative Thinking. LENT. I'll give a whole lecture about stopping thinking negatively, and that'll be what we do. So we did it, but this one little girl, she came up and she stood before the ashes and she started crying and she turned to me and she was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. A priest has to do it, or you. And so I was like, oh my God. So I put my finger in, made the sign of the cross on her head, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like a priest.
I'm
And I did
officially
it.
a priest.
I am now a priest, except I'm
No
going to have
collar.
sex tonight. Yeah, no collar. And I'm having sex tonight because my husband was with me. And that was that. And then I was like, yeah. And then I did it for years. And every year I had the ashes. And if I had to do it, I put the ashes on someone. So, but that was my first day. And that's how I got there, because I was cast by an entertainment director as the minister on ship.
Right. So, I mean, the pastoral duties, priest or pastor,
Yep.
fall under entertainment. So it's, well, our entertainment guidelines say you have to do the ashes.
Yeah, it's kind of necessary because
It's awesome.
every year that particular cruise was during Lent. Every year.
So you always got priestly duties.
Always had to at least the ashes. And I also married a lot of people. I did a lot of weddings and I did some funerals and, talk about ashes to ashes. I used ashes on last Wednesday, and sometimes I would help someone, disperse their lover's ashes into the ocean.
Wow. People who would bring ashes on board.
Because
knowing you're going to make a moment of this for memorial.
Yeah, because it was what they did as a couple. They loved traveling together on cruise ships.
Did they need to smuggle those on board, or was it cool to...
Nope. Get it with a list of all of my duties. You've got to run the AA meetings. And I was like, yeah, I'm also not in a 12-step program, so probably they don't want me in there. And so I'd always go to the head of the AA meeting and I'd say, I'm not a 12-stepper, but if you need me in here, I'm happy to sit and observe. And they were like, oh no, just bring the donuts and then leave.
We got this.
Yeah, we got this. So I would bring the donuts and leave.
Awesome. And that's friends of Bill on board.
Yeah. It is, yes. You're a cruise director. You were.
Also, friends of Dorothy was another, obviously, if it's not a full gay cruise, meetings where LGBTQ people would know, the fun little code on the docket, the line of the daily program would be Friends of Dorothy gathering in the Shell Bar.
I know. Well, they didn't have that on this cruise because you'd have to have friends of, I don't know, Charlton Heston. Like the straight people that are still on board.
Awesome. Practically speaking, what did a day in the life of a pastor on board look like? What was your schedule?
I would get up in the morning. First, I went to an AA meeting to set up the AA meeting, which was very early. Then I'd go right to the gym. Then I would go have breakfast. I always ate in the dining room because I'm not fond of food that everybody breathes on. You know that. The Lido. Yes, I'm not a Lido eater. I like to order, when there's three things to choose from, to order all three and eat all three. Mm-hmm. So I would eat breakfast. And then I usually had a lecture. I had either a lecture on my book or a discussion about something. I was always on their menu of entertaining things that were happening. Then lunch, then whatever the event was for the day, Kevin and I would do it. And there was always another AA meeting around dinner time that I would go facilitate. And pretty much that was it. Then the evening, we just go have fun. Unless there was a wedding, or if it was Ash Wednesday, I had to go put the ashes on. And if it was the wedding, then my husband became the wedding singer. He would come and sing for the weddings. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Ave Maria by Kevin.
No, it wasn't that kind of wedding. It was more like, what did he sing? He would sing really cool songs like,
Turn Back Time.
If I could turn back time. No, that would have been great, wouldn't it? If I could turn back time, you'd all look young. So, yeah, that was really pretty much the day, unless there was a catastrophe or there was something that had to be dealt with, which it seemed every day something got added that I had to do. They wanted me to be in the dating game. They were like, we think it'd be so cool if the
Ooh.
minister was one of the three guys in the dating game. And I was like, no, would not be cool. I do not want to be in the dating game. And my husband was like, no, do it. And then they came to us and said, will you two be in the newlywed game? And I was like, no, it'll be embarrassing when he has no clue of who I am. It's really, I don't want to do that. So we didn't do any of those things, but we went and watched, and I loved bingo. Didn't you have to do bingo?
Yeah. Yep, I had some bingo duties. Mostly you try to pawn those off, but yeah, you've got to host some bingo.
So that was pretty much my day.
And bingo's the craze out there. And people get ferocious with bingo out there in trivia.
Trivia,
it's intense. There's no prizes.
Well, I don't think you're allowed to have chips. You're not allowed to have money prizes.
Right. It sounds like you had such a full plate. There was a lot of things for you to do, and you got joy in both worlds of having guest privileges, but yet being crew. And you got to interact both with guests and crew alike, and probably found yourself as counselor, pastor, shoulder to cry on, lean on from everybody, knowing you held that title. So what did that feel like?
Ego is a funny thing. When I think about ego, I have two expressions for it. Entertaining God only, which is a very healthy, strong, vibrant, powerful ego, and then edging God out, meaning let's forget about all that and let's just do what I want to do any way I want to do it and not care about it. So for me, knowing who I am on a ship, and actually even in my life now, I have my services are live cast every Sunday with a 5-camera shoot. So people are always stopping me on the street, watching me. We have lots of people that watch me on Sundays. And, I come from that. When I was on Broadway, every time I'd leave the stage door, I'd be signing autographs. So I'm used to being in that position. Interestingly enough, I was just the guest on a Zoom show, which had a few hundred people watching. And somebody said to me, you seem to have moved into a different part of your life. I was like, is this you're old? What are you trying to say? And they were like, no, we've always loved your stories and everything, but there was a certain humility to you this time we've never really felt. First I'm thinking, oh my God, have I always been not humble? And then I watched it myself and I went, it's not humility. It's knowing who I am so comfortably that I'm unapologetic. And yet.
And all facades are moved to the side.
I know who I am now. The aging process, and I'm sure you've discussed this at some point in all your podcasts. We don't have to get old, but we do age. Two very different things. I will never get old, but I'll age. And I'm aging. Like somebody just said to me, if you dyed your hair black, go back to your black hair color, you'd still look like you were in your 30s. And I was like, no, I'd look like a mature man dyeing his hair black. Frankly. But, I'm okay with it. So I'm good with where I am and who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah. So you got reeled in through entertainment and it weaved in the pastoral duties, priestly duties. So what is that like doing weddings and funerals out at sea?
I loved doing weddings out at sea because in the beginning, it wasn't legal. When I started, Obama hadn't helped us get a legal wedding. So it was always a commitment ceremony, and people did have their partnership papers, that they used back then. And I would marry 20, 30 couples at a time. So it was like this big event with all these couples dressed in, some of them had tuxes on, and they had their families there, and it was really beautiful. And I had a great time. I also did divorces.
No way.
Seriously. People would come on the cruise and, they were there because they were working out through a divorce, and they'd still come on the cruise, and it was called conscious uncoupling. And so they would come to me.
That's a nice way to put it.
I know, isn't it? Work through consciously uncoupling.
That's great. And you would help them uncouple in a peaceful manner, almost ceremonially.
I would counsel them in how to consciously uncouple, where you remember why you got married in the first place and became respectful of why each of you needed to move on in another direction.
Wow. Very cool. So did you do these services up in the crow's nest overlooking the whole ship or out on the bow?
I love that you were a cruise director because I say crow's nest and people are like, what?
Is that
Where's
what?
that? Yeah.
So that's
No,
the
yes. In the crow's nest. Yes.
for the
Crow's
listeners.
nest.
What's our crow's nest?
The crow's I don't know. You have to say that. It's in the front. It's this beautiful little bar in the front of the ship, right?
It's usually one of the top decks, so
Right.
9 or 10, where this gorgeous glass fronted sits there and you can sit and have a cocktail or a coffee and play
Yes.
games, and then fun events can happen up there where people get to watch the water and do unique activities like get married with 20 other couples.
Yeah, I love the crow's nest. I actually just love going up there and hanging out. It's really beautiful. How many cruises have you done?
Wow.
How many cruises have you done?
I honestly don't know the number. A lot, 4 contracts, I believe, with
4-year contracts or 4 6-month contracts?
no 4 monthly contracts where I did 4 to 5 months at a time.
That's a lot. Yeah,
And
I probably
sometimes
did.
those are shorter because a cruise director's duties, and I've talked this with several guests, are so intense, the schedule, that it might be 3, it might be 4, but you can always extend, like you said, with the priest. Like, he's got to go, or he had to go run to do something else. Schedules change. People get caught up doing things. You get called in or you ask to stay for longer. And you're like, well, I'll take another month.
I'll take another cruise. I'll take
Yeah.
another month. Yeah, I probably did it like 17 cruises maybe.
Okay. And were these
I know
all
I
gay
was
cruises?
shy of 20, all gay.
Wow. Okay, so you found that niche and you jumped into the gay cruises.
Well, true story. First cruise I went on. Have you ever done any of the gay cruises as a
I never did. I did lesbian cruises and blues cruise and several other variations.
You did
of who would come
you
on
did
board.
the blues? You did the blues cruise cruise?
Yes.
We did too.
Okay.
Our children were blues clues fanatics.
Huh.
And we were all devastated when Steve left, and they replaced him with Joe. I probably know way more about Blues Clues than
I
you
bet
do.
you do. I really bet you do.
Yeah, having had children during that time. But I had these amazing experiences with all of the types of cruises they were. So the first cruise I was on, I'm looking at my little, what are they called? The daily roster?
Usually various things. Daily guide, daily, yeah.
Yeah, right. And it said underwear night. And my husband was like thrilled. He was like, "Oh my God, look, it's underwear night." And I was like,
"It's gonna be fun."
I said, "Honey, I'm the minister on this ship. I really don't think they want the minister there in his underwear."
Like,
so I said,
"Wear these."
Yeah, so here, wear these. They cover up. No, and I was like, and he was like, "Well, I'm wearing underwear just because I'm the minister's wife."
The minister's wife out in her undies.
Out in her undies. And they don't know who he is anyway. They know who I am because they brought me out, in the opening when they show you here's everybody who's on board.
Yeah.
And so I go down to the underwear party and I'm about to go into the room and the guy in charge goes, "I'm sorry, you can't go in unless you're in your underwear. It makes people uncomfortable if other people are not in their underwear." I was like, "I'm the minister on the ship. I doubt anybody wants to see the minister on their ship in underwear." And he just looked me over and went, "I think we do want to see you in your underwear." And I was like, "Well, that's very flattering." And James, just go put your underwear on.
Sir, nobody gets in here with pants on.
I know. It was like hysterical. So I was like, well, what do I do? So I went upstairs, took off my clothes, and I had a pair of tight boxers that, I just wore to hang out in. So I put those on and I came back downstairs and the guy was like, "Now that's more like it." And I was very uncomfortable at first. I mean, it's not that I'm not prudish at all, but I was very uncomfortable in my position.
Right.
As the minister on the ship.
Everyone's going to be hot for pastor.
Well, and one day I'm there hanging out and the next day I'm putting ashes on a little crying girl's face. It's just a little too schizophrenic for me. So that was like the early part of the week. Then comes leather night.
Ooh.
And I said to Kevin, "Do you think they're going to tell me I can't get in without leather?" I said, "Because I do not have leather." And he's, "I don't know, let's find out." And he, of course, had his leather chain and he was like all set up. And I was like, this is so surreal to me. So we get down there and they were like, "Yeah, you kind of need some piece of leather on you." And this guy that we had made friends with, he was like, "I have a pair for you." And so I went up to his place and it was this beautiful pair of leather pants that actually fit me great, except there was no butt in it. So I was like, "So I can't really wear these. I am the minister on them." And he says, "Well, maybe we get you a collar." I said, "No, if I'm going to wear them, we're not projecting who I am." And so I went and got a pair of jeans, put them under the pants, and then I was fine. But the whole time I'm like, this was way more than I anticipated.
Yeah. That is hysterical. Minister and assless chaps coming to the party.
Yeah.
That is a lot of
Nowadays,
fun.
now I might risk that. But back then I was a little too young as a minister.
Yeah. Well, it's unique, you holding both of these spaces of pastor and gay man and the fun and freedom out there to celebrate and be liberated, and also your unique take on you wanting to maintain, that position. How did you get so passionate about wanting to be in that position?
Well, it's funny. I always only wanted to be an actor. I moved to New York when I was cast in a show to star as young Ben Franklin in this off-Broadway production of Ben Franklin. So I went to New York. I always knew that's where I was headed, and I just loved it. And within 5 years, I was starring in a Broadway show, and my career just like just took off. And that's really was my career for a very long time, like from 1974 to 1994. And I was just like, this is it. I'm never going anywhere. I'm living in New York. I had a beautiful apartment in New York. And then I'd written a new musical called An Unfinished Song, which was one of the first, maybe the first gay musical ever produced off Broadway back in God, when was that? 88, 90, something like that. And then it got sent out to LA. So we went out to do the LA production, and I was starring in it as well. And a friend of mine said, you got to come hear the guy at my church. And I was always religious. I was always very religious. And I'd always go to Unity, or I went to Catholic church for a very long time. And I went and heard this guy speak. And as soon as he started speaking, I was captivated. He was funny. He was audacious. He was unapologetic. He was gay. And I was like, where has this been my whole life? This idea that, my mind creates my experience, my thoughts are what matters, and God is everyone and everything. And I was like, this feels so right. So I just started going to church there and taking classes. I swear to God, it's like I went to church, started taking classes, and the next thing I know, I'm turning to my husband saying, I think I need to open a church. And his first response, I don't know, can you curse on these podcasts?
Absolutely.
Great. So his first response was, you are not going to fuck up every Sunday for the rest of our lives.
You're going to fuck up every brunch from here until Kingdom Come.
Every weekend. We can't go out on Saturday nights because you got to be awake and conscious for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was like, Kevin, this is not me. This is something bigger than me that is taking me over. And I did not decide to give everything up to become a minister. No, we bought a theater and turned the theater into the church and ran a full theater company along with a full church. And for 15 years, for 15 years, we ran the NoHo Arts Center in North Hollywood, which was this amazingly successful theater. We took one show to Broadway, we took shows to off-Broadway. We did everything we'd ever done. I produced, I wrote, I directed, I acted. We did everything we'd ever done. And I taught, I counseled, I spoke on Sundays. And so that was the most fulfilling, amazing thing to happen. You said it earlier, right at the beginning of the podcast. All the things that I grew up learning to do, singing, dancing, acting, being on stage, being comfortable in front of people, all of that came together. And when I started operating from a consciousness of understanding what God is, who I am in relationship to God, it all just gelled. Hell, 3 weeks ago, I did a talk that I tap danced in the middle of.
Yeah.
I just threw on my tap shoes and danced to 42nd Street.
The tapping pastor.
Why not, right? So yeah, so that's where the passion comes from, I think, because I never had to say no to acting or performing in order to say yes to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I just say yes to whatever wants to come through me.
Yeah. What did you find out at sea on these gay cruises, the guests' needs, like spiritually? What did they come to you for? Was there a confession booth, or did they just know your place and talk to you?
Oh my God, could you imagine what that I would have been stuck in that confession booth for like an entire 10 days.
The entire cruise.
The entire cruise. I'd be like, what happened? I can tell you what they all did.
If these walls could
what
talk.
Happened? Oh yeah. No. I have to say, for me, something did happen on that very first cruise, and it was right after the leather party. It was actually during the leather party, and I'd gone up to the balcony to to get an overview of 2,000 men in leather, and most of them not a lot of leather, by the way. Yeah,
Little bitty
so
leather.
little bitty. Some of them circular, and that's all they
Awesome.
wore was a little, ring. And I was up there looking down, and I was like, "Wow, I've gotten this all wrong. I keep thinking that I have to bring spirituality to certain circumstances." And what I really got in a big way, so much so that I even cried,
Hmm.
I was like, God is in the leather. God is in the underwear. God is in the dancing. God is everywhere present on this cruise, and I was like, I get it. I get it. It's all an expression, and people expressing themselves, expressing their creativity, their sexuality. That's all God. And far be it from me to judge, which I think I was doing,
Hmm.
judge people because they're in leather dancing around and going crazy. So that was a big education for me, that God is in the leather. In fact, my talk that Sunday when I got back from the cruise was God is in the
God is in the
leather.
leather.
Yeah. And my congregation was like, what are you? What?
Well,
Yeah, I talked about
yeah.
leather night. I talked about underwear night. I talked about everything. They loved it. They couldn't wait for me to go away every year on a cruise.
There's this, like, the old school Christian in me, when
Mm,
people would get so excited and thrilled about various artists performing and their music in a giant concert where thousands of people have come together in love of a certain style of music. And in beautiful harmony, this many thousands of people together are just in that same space in such awe of a song and enjoyment that it truly is like a holy moment, a spiritual experience. And I had such judgment on that. I'm like, no, if it's not Jesus Christ at the centerpiece of it, it can't be of God. It can't. Just so stern, so strict that I feel like I missed so much of God all around me. And I hear
yeah.
a lot of stories, especially from the LGBTQ, that once their churches essentially said, not welcome here, they found
Mm,
their welcome and they found their community at gay bars just to sit and talk. They didn't go for to get drunk or to get wasted or to get wild. They went for communion. They went for community with other people, to find a
yeah.
tribe, to find a welcome. Can you talk on that a little bit about how you reconciled that within yourself, and then how you saw that in so many cruises like that with your role as pastor, and what's
Yeah.
sometimes deemed as like I don't know, an unholy cruise or something, debauchery or whatever?
An unholy cruise. What a funny concept. I grew up Catholic. And so for my formative years when I was understanding my sexuality, which I didn't understand really, I was shameful. It was all shame. I was shamed by my religion. I was shamed by my peers at the time when I was growing up. And even when I got to New York, I played a game. I mean, I literally played a game of being straight as long as I could handle it, as long as I could actually make it work. And have you ever heard of a thing called the imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Yeah. So I really suffered from that because the roles I first got when I got to New York, I was cast as Riff in West Side Story, the big Broadway revival with Jerome Robbins and Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim. So I was only the third really, because the movie. But there was the original Riff, then the Riff that was cast in the movies, and I was the new contemporary 1980 Riff that they cast. Well, Riff is one of the most masculine, hardest danced roles in Broadway history. And there I am inside, little gay boy, who feels very feminine and playing this macho macho character. And the imposter syndrome was just raging. And so it was during West Side Story that I think it was The Advocate. If you remember The Advocate, the
The
publication.
magazine. Yeah.
Yes, they came to review the show and they reviewed the show and gave me an amazing review. And then the writer of the review reached out to my publicist and asked if I would do an interview. And during the interview, I don't know how I did this. And when I tell you the final bit of the story, you're going to just be surprised. I actually came out, I guess. I basically said, I'm an open gay actor. And I actually said that in The Advocate at the peak of my career. And
Having not formally been out.
having formerly not even thought that I was going to do that. And
Wow.
perhaps maybe not even noticing I did it. to be perfectly honest, because I didn't notice I did it. People would say it to me, and I'd be like, oh, it was an article. And I went right back in. I just kept playing the game until I met my husband, which was 12 years later. So just recently, my 23-year-old son, we were going through my steamer trunk with all these programs and pictures of me with Jimmy Carter and Ethel Merman. And he said, Dad, I just read this article. You came out as gay when you were in West Side Story? I was like, I did not. What are you, crazy? He went, Dad, I'm reading the article. And he shows me the article, and I'm reading it going, holy shit,
I
I
came out.
did. I came out as gay in that one article. And I was like, talk about the imposter syndrome. Talk about denial, not even realizing. I felt comfortable with this guy. I felt very honest about who I was, but I probably wasn't giving it much thought that what I'm saying is going into an article that people are going to read. And I remember Baryshnikov was on the cover of the article, and his second half of his story came at where mine was, and we were on the same page. And I thought, well, I guess no one's going to miss this one. They're going to see me. So, what did I learn from being on the ship and being part of that time when my friend asked me if I would do this, and I kept doing it for a few years? I think I kind of bridged all the shame I had. I didn't know I still had shame in me. And even recently, my daughter, my 19-year-old daughter, I have twins, boy and a girl. And my 19-year-old daughter was in a tragic car accident 4 years ago and passed away. And so these last 4 years have been all about navigating grief and trying to understand it. And luckily, my spiritual beliefs, understanding that life unfolds perfectly for everyone, regardless of what it looks like, knowing that her life is still blessed and she's moving on to whatever she's moved on to. But it was very, difficult. So I hired a grief counselor, and I've been working with him for a couple of years. And just recently, he said to me, he said, you do know you still have shame about being gay. And I was like, oh, please. I said, I've handled that. He went, no, not based on some of the things you're telling me. And you know what it was? It was about sexual equality in men. And he was like, every time you tell me that it's uncomfortable for you to be passive in a gay relationship, he said, I always think, why is that hard? And now I've given all this thought about, I was brought up to be a macho, which I'm not. I mean, everybody knows I'm not that macho at all. My son tells me all the time, he goes, Dad, you're a little light. Yeah.
Riff knows.
Riff was macho. But when I was done playing Riff, I was like, where are we going? Where are we going to dance tonight? And I think everybody has this going on, or a lot of people have this going on in the gay community. Certainly, maybe not the youngest generation right now. And I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to assume you're in your...
I'm 22.
I wasn't going to say that.
Old enough to know.
Are you still in your 20s?
No.
Okay, so okay. So I would say maybe some of the young kids that are in their 20s, like my son is not gay. He's not straight. He is fluid. And he said, Dad, I don't fall in love with the gender. I'm attracted to the person. And
Wow.
I jokingly said to him about a year ago, I was like, Will, you got to stop saying that you're not straight, because we both know you're straight. And so if you keep saying you don't fall in love with the person, the gender, you fall in love with the person, you're attracted to the person, I said, you are eventually going to have to deal with the male genitalia. Have you thought about that? He just looked at me and he went, Dad, do you think I have not dealt with the male genitalia?
Whoa.
I was like, no, I didn't. He said, Dad, I've been down that road a number of times, and it's always fun. He said, but I emotionally feel better with women. He said, but you never know.
Yeah.
I was like flabbergasted.
Dad got floored.
Because I still operate sometimes from the straight. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait, straight gay? There's
Yes.
no such thing as straight gay, my son says. He says, Dad, there's no straight gay. There's just sexuality. We have all of it. And some of us are in touch with it, and some people aren't. And I was like, okay.
I think that's a really beautiful notion. And I mean, there's so many varying takes on people still stuck with like one man, one woman, versus so many notions of humanity that it doesn't fit in one box for everybody. And how beautiful that even at your age, in your experience, your son can tell you.
At my age? What do you mean at my age?
You're 35, right?
You don't even know how old I am.
You're 35 is what the word was.
Let's go with 35. Yeah. I've done a very good job aging, but no, I am not 35.
This is a very handsome man that I look at. I wouldn't.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So the point I was trying to make in that whole story and bringing my son in I have a hard time being feminine. I have a hard time being in a relationship. Even I've been married 34 years to the same man. And he still says to me, he said, could you just, sometimes you need to be passive. Sometimes you need to let me take charge. And when I do, it's uncomfortable. And it's only uncomfortable because I somehow have an image of who I'm supposed to be as a man sexually. I'm supposed to be the aggressor. I'm supposed to be, the one that takes charge. I'm supposed to be because I still have this paradigm of male female. And so I don't want to be the female. And now here I am. And you're right. At my ripe age of whatever that is, we're not sharing that tonight. I'm actually trying to explore sexuality so much in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I'm kind of done with being shamed at being gay. And now I want to know, what is gay like at this age? What is gay like for me now?
Yeah.
So so it's fun.
I think that's a great journey you're on. And thank you for sharing so much of those details, and especially with the loss of your daughter. My condolences, and I'm sorry for that loss. It's the first time, I think, listening to you explore this topic with grief that's put a knot in my throat, and you almost got some tears out of here. So thank you for sharing such an intimate story with us.
You know what? Thank you for creating this atmosphere that I feel very comfortable. Watch, I'm going to listen to this podcast and go, I said what? You're kidding. You're just like the advocate. You're just you're pulling it all out of me. I haven't talked about this sexuality thing with anyone other than my therapist.
You just came out on my podcast. I just
came out as no, not polyamorous.
Pollyanna.
My husband would be like, what? You're polyamorous now?
So I want to dial us back to the ship life a little bit, and maybe just some...
that is the show.
Some quick rapid fire questions about your life out there. Was the money good for a pastor on board?
The money was not good. The money was, I don't even know how much they gave me.
And what was the time frame, again, that you were in this role?
The years, or how many years?
Years,
I think I did it for about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And I would do like 2, 3, sometimes 4 cruises a year.
And when was the time frame? What years was this?
Where are we now? 2022? Mm-hmm. I would say like 2010 to like 2015, maybe.
Okay. We may have crossed paths where we've just missed each other.
No, I would know if I crossed your path.
So let me ask you this. As you were working out under there, essentially you are with entertainment. So the cruise director and event manager and people coordinating schedules, those are your go-tos. How was your relationship with various people? Was there ever a cruise director you're just like, what a dick? Or was there somebody who just warmed your heart?
They actually all did. I mean, and we're generally the same cruise directors because they all went on the gay cruises. And RSVP, I loved RSVP, but I will say that it shifted ownership a couple times, and you felt the difference in the ownerships,
Okay. Because again, when these charters come on, it's really a different presence than the regular crew. Sometimes they bring their own cruise director in person, guiding the events and things that happen and flow. So you turn to different leadership.
Well, but you were still on there. You guys were still on there. They would have a cruise director. It was always fun when the cruise director was straight and the director from the RSVP, of course, was gay. And this one time, he was so handsome, they actually kind of auctioned him off, and he did this strip tease and went all the way down to his skivvies. And I remember when I was sharing that with my friend who got me the job, she was like, I'm sorry, he did what? And I was like, oh my God, if I'm like talking out of turn here, please do not say that I'm the one that told you. Yeah, no. And then she just went, no, were there pictures?
She wants to see the pictures.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't take pictures. There was some sort of decor I had to handle.
Awesome. Was there ever anything on ports of call or land that got tricky or sticky?
Yes, there was one port of call, and I cannot remember where it was, where we were told not to hold hands, not to touch on this particular island. And I have a husband who's quite a renegade, and he refused to do that. He said, you know what? I'm holding your hand. And if they arrest us, and I'm like, I'm sorry, am I part of this? Because I will not do well in jail. I'm way too pretty. And I was like, this is not going to work for me. But I had to come to terms with that as well. I was like, why is there something in me that when I know that there are people who disapprove of me, why do I honor that and play by their rules? And so we did walk down the beach hand in hand. We just walked down the beach hand in hand. And there were people that gave us looks, and we just did it anyway. Of course, I did get talked to by the captain afterwards. He said,
What captain have to say?
He said, well, we found that everybody seemed to respect the rule of not holding hands or anything. And I hear it coming. He's like, there were some people that just, they just felt like they had to, express who they were. I said, yeah, I know. And he looked at me and he just smiled. I went, that's my husband.
Man, I like Kevin. One of the most memorable spiritual experiences you had out there as a pastor on board.
Right. So other than the gay leather men, where I realized it was all God, there was a time where we were all getting ready to go on to... So everybody's getting ready. We have these jet skis planned for the day. And
this is a beautiful private island, white sand beaches, crystal clear blue waters. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. And everybody's just lathered up in suntan lotion and, little Speedos galore. And I'm watching people as they're getting on the, leaving the boat and getting on the little boats. And I get a note, go up to the captain's, whatever that's. Where is the captain? Where's the captain's? The bridge.
The bridge.
You. And so I go up to the bridge and the captain said, we have a little problem. I said, what is it? He said, well, there was a 92-year-old woman who was snorkeling. And we told her she couldn't go because she was too old. And we don't let that age go snorkeling. But she signed a waiver. She'd never been snorkeling. She wanted to go snorkeling. This was on her bucket list. And she went snorkeling and she died. And all of the crew had to pull her out of the water. And I'm like, we have a 92-year-old woman on this ship? He went, no, it's our sister ship that's already docked. And I'm thinking, no, I'm with this ship. And they were like, you're a friend that hired you. She said you'd be the perfect person to go counsel all these young 20-somethings that have never experienced something like this before. And so I come downstairs and Kevin's like, you ready? I said, no, in fact,
sir.
You go ahead. And so they put me
ready for the funeral.
So they put me in a hut, but I had a window so I could see my husband riding on his jet ski and all these guys having this amazing time. But I had an amazing time as well because I sat there counseling these young souls who were so upset that they might have caused this. And I just getting quiet. When I counsel, I just get quiet to see what wants to be talked about here. And I was able to tell all of these kids, I said, guys, she was 92. It was on her bucket list. She signed a waiver so that she knew if anything went wrong, it wasn't nobody's fault but hers. She went down there. The last thing she saw was some of the most gorgeous images anyone would ever see. And then she slipped away. I said, frankly, that would be a lovely ending for me as well. And the kids all seemed to get it. They were like, yeah. I said, so it's not your fault. You just happen to be a part of this. I said, but now you get to start asking yourself, what does this mean? What's the difference between life and death? What is that 1 second? What is that nanosecond? There's no time involved on the quantum field. You are alive here, now you're alive there. That's all it is. And these kids that were mostly all probably Catholic or Christian, or at least when they started, when they left with smiles on their faces. And I spent the whole day doing this. I mean, I spent 8 hours in that room. They brought me food, but and so as we're getting back on the ship and all these overly burnt and oily gay men and my husband, like so tired from being on the ski jet all day, they're all like dragging themselves into the ship. And I am like wide awake and like I've been through this amazing spiritual journey of asking myself, what does this mean? And it was just beautiful. It was just a beautiful expression of allowing life to unfold and show you its wonder, even if it looks like it's not so wonderful.
Wow. That's a really beautiful story.
It doesn't start out beautiful. As soon as I say, and she died, people are like, oh.
Right. Wow. Yeah. But, I mean, you went from sipping rum swizzlers and dancing on the beach with all these beefy, hunky men and to, Pastor, can you step over here to the
dark side
zone? But how truly beautiful that you got to be such a bridge and remind people of that between life and death and what this life is.
It was beautiful.
Really
and
cool.
I benefited because that night, Captain sent to our table this gorgeous bottle of champagne, like really expensive champagne. I said, see, Kevin, there are perks to being a minister.
Cheers
Yes.
to that. What's one of the craziest things that you remember happening? I cannot believe that happened to me. Was there any close calls with getting back on board or any trouble out at sea?
No, I'll tell you. Yeah. One of my last ones. It might have been the last cruise even. I'm up on I think it was on at the crow's nest. Now, does the crow's nest go out onto a balcony?
Some of them do.
I think this one did. I'm on the crow's nest and I see this helicopter land on the boat and this woman get out holding a dog. And it's Carrie Fisher. And I knew that Carrie Fisher was coming onto the ship to do her show, whatever the name of that show is.
Princess Leia?
Princess Leia gets off of this helicopter. It flies away. She puts the dog down and she's romping on the deck and she's like walking into the jacuzzi with her clothes on. And I was like, oh no, she's off her meds. This is not a good thing. And witnessed this. And so and then I kind of lost sight of her. And that night, her first show that night, I'm sitting in the audience just as an audience member. And I'm watching, and the show was late. It started like 15 minutes late. And all of a sudden, Carrie comes out, but she's, hi, how are y'all doing? And my spidey sense was like, there's something up here. And because I had watched a little bit of a rehearsal, and I thought, this isn't how this is supposed to start. It's supposed to start with the band playing, and then a film clip rolls, and then the film clip goes out, and she's behind it. I said, what happened? And so she comes out and she's like, can somebody bring me a chair? And it was all unscripted and she had lost it. She was really, here's the thing. Bipolar disorder is very difficult. So she was in the high of a bipolar episode. And, there's 1,000 men in this theater. And at first they're all screaming and they're all loving her and all. And at one point she gave away her cell phone number saying, just call me if you're in West Hollywood and come to my house. But after a while, people started getting up and leaving. And then the cruise director came over to me and said, could you come with us, please? I said, sure. So I followed them and I said, look, guys, you got to get her off the stage. This is disrespectful to her. This is a medical issue, to be perfectly honest. And so we calculated how to go and handle that. And so we ended the show, took her away, and I said, under no circumstances are you doing a second show with her. I said, this is not good. Let's get Freddie and Amy. They can come and do their big show in the second half. And I said, and then they were like, will you please come up and talk to her and help her understand this? And I was like, this is really beyond my pay grade. And by the way, you're not paying me. You're giving me a free cruise. But I also knew that probably I was capable of talking to her with respect and love and handling it. So I went up. And I never went into the room. Her handler came out and he was like, okay, so we'll try to do the second show. I said, absolutely not. You're not doing the second show. And he said, well, they said that we were contracted. I said, I don't care. Tell them no. But why don't we do this? Why don't we put Carrie up in the crow's nest and put her in a chair? Because it seems to be the one thing she's happy with right now. And let everybody come around and ask her questions. Those who want to meet her and be with her, they can come up and have fun with her. And so we did that. And then I did get to talk to her. And there was a moment where she just, because they told her that I'd set all this up, there was this moment where she just grabbed my hand and went, thank you. And I could see through her eyes that there was Princess Leia. There was that amazingly talented, creative genius inside there saying, something's off. And then all of a sudden, all over YouTube, all snippets of what she did on the stage. Her dog pooped on the stage and they had to come and clean it up. I mean, there was so many wacky, crazy things. And these queens are like, really getting off on it. And then some of them just left. And so I had one of my best friends had bipolar. And there were times when she would be I'd know it instantly that she was in a high. And one night she went out in New York and went to all the Broadway shows with her husband's credit card and bought tickets to every show and then just gave them out on the street while she was in a high. And I remember her husband saying to me, do you know how much that cost me? I was like, she had a good time though. I mean, she really did have a good time. And it's because she didn't want to take her meds. But in Carrie's position, it's not that she didn't want to take her meds. She was not drunk. She was not drinking. It's that somehow a doctor had prescribed something different and it acted with something. And whatever it was, and she explained it on, I was going to say Johnny Carson. That's how old I am. On Johnny Carson. It wasn't Johnny
Mm.
Carson.
I've seen
Thank
Johnny
you.
Carson.
Well, we already established that you're not in your 20s. So, so that was really the craziest night of my time on the ship, because most of it was, yes, there were couples that came on board in love and now they're ready to get a divorce. And so they pull me in to try to do some counseling to help them leave the ship without killing each other. Those kinds of things, and this is a fun one too. A thruple. What do you call them?
A
A
throuple on
thruple on
board.
board. Wanted a counseling session. I was like, well, all right. I don't know where to put my focus, but okay, let's do that. And so we just had this whole, and it was interesting because I don't, the whole polyamorous world. I once was a guest speaker at Berkeley. I was in a room with all these young kids, well, Berkeley students. And I said, why don't we all go around the room and everybody share something about themselves? All the way around the room, everybody was polyamorous. I'm polyamorous. I'm with my husband. I'm with my boyfriend here and our girlfriend. And I'm like, but oddly enough, for some reason, I'd never heard the term. And so by the time it got back to me, I was like, well, you're going to have to come out of the closet here and just tell them you're an idiot. You have no idea what they just said to you. So I was like, okay, guys, I don't know what polyamorous means. And there's laughter. And I'm the expert coming in to talk about sexuality and spirituality, those two together. And I said, and then they told me, and I was like, oh, you mean like a threesome? And they were like, no, it is not just about sex. It's about being in love with more than one person at a time and all of us joining together in this field of love. I was like, in my head, I'm like, someone's always left out. Just telling you. There's always this guest star and the two leading players. So I met with this couple and it was really wild. It was wild. I mean, they went through their sexual proclivities when one of them was like explaining, I'm tired of always being the bottom. And I'm sitting there going, surely they know I'm the minister on the ship, but I guess it doesn't matter to them. And they're just going on and on. And I was fascinated. I thought, oh, I could write a book about this. But I wouldn't, of course. So
Truly a confession from a throuple to the pastor.
I know. Have you ever been in a throuple?
I have not that I know of.
You would know. I think you would know.
One knows
Yes.
we're in a throuple. What kept you going back for more contracts?
Honestly, my husband.
I'm with Kevin.
Kevin loved it. It was really the only perk he could see with me being a minister, but he absolutely loved it. In fact, he just said the other day, he said, don't you think you could get back on the ship as a minister? I was like, no, I've traveled everywhere. We did Rome, we did Greece, we did, Alaska 4 times. We did the Caribbean 1,000 times. I said, so no, I'm good. I'm good.
So you have been all over. What is one of your absolute most favorite destinations?
To be honest, Alaska is one of my favorite destinations.
Yeah.
I'm not a sun person. I don't necessarily like to lay in the sun and get all, really take care of my skin. And I don't want to be sunburnt and age lines, which is why you don't know how old I am. So, but I loved Alaska, the glaciers. In fact, I'm going back to Alaska next year because now when I go on cruises, I still go on the cruise as a minister, but I'm the lecturing minister. I actually go on the cruise and take a whole group with me. So I'll have 50 people with me going on that cruise. Like we just chartered a yacht in Croatia for a week and it was spectacular. And I was the minister on the ship we only had 32 people because it was a yacht. It only had so many rooms, but it was great. And I love that. I love to be able to be leading a group through the spiritual nature of Croatia or wherever we're going. But we're taking them back to Alaska next spring.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What was one of the hardest things that you had to adjust to or didn't see coming?
The hardest part for me was when I had to facilitate the funeral. And I didn't know coming on board. And I think the ship's captain was supposed to do it. And the ship's captain asked if I would consider taking his place. And it was I buried my best friend who died of AIDS way back in 1984, 85. And I've had a lot of people pass away. My daughter had not yet at this point, but a lot of people had passed away. And while I've done tons of funerals and I do tons of celebrations, celebrations of life, it's one of the things I love helping people celebrate. I will say that this one I wasn't prepared for because the husband was so distraught and so moved. And when he started explaining how this is what they did every year for the last 20 years, and this time he would just sob through the whole thing, wanting to understand why he had to come back this one last time without him, even though he had his ashes. And it was very challenging for everyone. The ending. So they opened the porthole, and, the husband was going to throw the ashes out. And he asked me to hold him, and I did. And he took the ashes, and just as he threw them out the porthole, something happened, and they all came back on us. And we were just standing there. And at first, and I forget the husband's name. What was it? Donnie? Something like Donnie or Denny. He went, "Of course Denny would do that." And, everybody laughed, and it kind of helped the moment. And I didn't even know what to
Yeah.
do because I was like, I don't want to like brush him off of me. That seems so rude. Yeah.
Disrespectful.
And I had on a dress shirt. So I literally took my shirt off. And I'm a pretty buff guy. I'm a pretty muscular guy. I go to the gym every day. And I take my shirt off.
What kind of
I
funeral
know,
is
right?
this?
And the guy and the husband, he turned and looked at me and went, "That is Donnie giving me a gift." And I was like, "Oh, that is so sweet of you. I just want to, shake it out the porthole." And so then he took his shirt off, and we're both there, these two gay men shaking out ashes out a porthole. So I was very grateful that the captain didn't do that because I don't know that he would have navigated that the way I navigated it, the way we all navigated it in that moment. So as challenging as that was, it still ended up being a very sweet moment at the end. I'd say that
Yeah.
about everything in life. Everything unfolds perfectly if you're willing to stand in it long enough, feel it, even in grief, and feel it enough to understand what it is. You're like, what?
I think that's exactly where I was out on my cruise days and time. Though I was like out, I still almost went back in and tried to revamp who I was. And I was still cycling addiction and so many other things that I was just running away and not taking time to be still. And the cruise director position kept me so busy that I didn't have to. And when I wasn't busy, I was getting drunk and getting wild, that I didn't have to feel some feelings that it might have taken a bit more time.
In your cruise days, that's when you had your drinking.
Yeah, it reached its breakdown for me.
Yeah, look at it too. You and I were both under the same contract in one sense. So what? Somebody would pay $15 for a drink and it would cost us $1.25. The thing is, I don't really drink much, but my husband loved it because it was like I could order anything for him.
Yeah, because you got to go all access. You had an all access pass on board to go to crew areas, guest areas. You were staying in the guest cabin. Any behind the scenes tales of what you witnessed within the crew or among staff or the hierarchy or wild things that you witnessed?
I was very surprised because I had in my contract, I had to have a balcony. I had to have one of the nice suites with a balcony. But I was very surprised that the entertainers lived in such squalor that the singers and dancers from the show were like down in the basement in these little like closets with no windows. And that shocked me. And then, because I would end up being friends with the entertainers because that's what I do. I sing, and before that, I was the entertainer.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. Right. I was like, how is it possible that you guys are all doing this? And then they'd be like, yeah, we have to be downstairs by midnight. We have a curfew. And I was like, you're like 36 years old. You have a curfew?
What? Exactly.
And so that really surprised me. There was a lot of hanky-panky between the entertainers.
Now, what is hanky-panky that you refer to?
Sex. I had this couple that worked for the cruise line, very handsome man and his wife. And I don't know that they knew I was the minister, but I was getting a massage from the husband, and I got a manicure, pedicure from the wife. And she actually sent me to him I went and got a mani-pedi, and she said, you know what, you should go get a massage with my husband. He's the best. And frankly, he really was amazing massage therapist. And they kind of offered me a guest star role in their life. And I was like,
a menage a trois. You were like Demi Moore in Indecent Proposal. You got...
Oh my God, I love that movie. Kevin and I almost divorced over that movie. I sat there riveted, and I was like, don't do it, don't do it. And Kevin's like, oh, James, if somebody offered us $1 million for you to sleep with them, of course you'd sleep with them. I went, no, I would not.
James almost did it for a massage and a mani-pedi.
Yeah, that's true. That's different. But $1 million, no, I can't be bought. But really, Kevin was like, are you telling me that if somebody wanted to have sex with you, and it's Robert Redford, for God's sake, and they want to have sex with you, and they'll give us $1 million, that you would say no? I'd say, well, I would actually hope you would say no. I said, now, whenever that movie came out, I think it was a long time ago, because Demi Moore is not quite a movie star at this point, and Robert Redford's not doing a lot either. Now, Kevin's like, James, surely because we just watched it recently, and he was like, so where do you stand now? And I was like, $1 million? I could muster it. I could take money. I said, in front of me, frankly, Kevin, for you, 10 grand. And I think I'd say, have at it, Kevin, if you're really happy doing it.
Kevin, do you know how many cruises we could buy with?
I know, right? With 10 grand, we could each go on a first class cruise. And if it's $1 million, we could take one of our shows to Broadway.
Amazing. One question I definitely want to ask before we wrap up everything is kind of our signature question here. It's such a journey going out there on this ship with the ocean ahead of you and sometimes all around you and nothing else you see and the places you go. And of course, the analogy of life being like a journey. What do we need to enjoy this journey of life?
I think the only way you can enjoy life is if you know who you are so clearly that there are no preconceived ideas of what life is about. And that you allow life to surprise you, that you allow the wonder of life to shift you at any moment, that you're willing to pivot if you need to pivot. And when you know who you are, when you really get who you are in this scheme of things, you're never trying to become something else. And then you have access to everything. To everything. Then it's like you are in the VIP room of a cruising ship, that everything is there for your enjoyment. And so for me, it's taken me all these years to really be clear on who I am and to enjoy it.
That's spot on. That's good stuff. Thank you. Well, you are a wonder. Thank you so much for sharing such a kaleidoscope of light and love that your life has been. But I think through every avenue of what you've lived, light has pierced through to every place you have shown up, it seems.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I really think the guests our listeners will be, I don't know, just charged up with joy and a lot of good things from all the things you've shared here.
I'm glad. I can't wait to hear it.
Right on. Me too.
All right, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much,
thank you,
James.
and have a great night. And let's plan to, hang out.
Okay, I'd love that. I'll ping you guys sometimes. I love to eat, so let's go get some food sometime.
Do that. Yes, perfect.
Bye now.
Have a good night.
Thank you for listening to this episode of our Wild Stories at Sea. If you have any crazy endeavors out on the Big Blue, email me at cruisedirectortyler@gmail.com. That's cruisedirectortyler@gmail.com. We would love to hear your stories, either on board or from the crew bar. And that's it for this port of call. Join us as we sail on to the next wave of outlandish stories on Shipfaced, Confessions of a Drunken Cruise Director and Friends. A quick disclaimer, while this podcast is based on the experiences of me and my guests, certain details may have been modified, and for privacy purposes, names of all parties may have been changed. The views and opinions expressed here are mine and my guests, and not that of any brand I may be affiliated with. Yes. Stop recording.